Welcome to Dark Days Radio, and we are back with another interesting, insightful, exciting episode. This time, we are looking at Vaesen, the mythic RP set in the Nordic regions in the Victorian period. In particular, we're looking at the current Kickstarter, which brings a new expansion to Vaesen, which takes the setting away from the Nordics and brings it back Britain and Ireland. We've got all of our local goblins. I'm one of your regular hosts, Chris, and of course I'm joined by David. Hello.
Hello.
And we're joined by James.
Hi, nice to see everyone.
And we're joined by guests from the Effekt Podcast. We're joined by Dave. He is there.
Dave, where are you? You're on mute.
And we're joined by Matthew, who you've just heard now.
I think this is going to get confusing with two Daves.
I'm sure Dave will sort himself out in a moment, and we will get that in the edit there. Anyway, so yes, as I said, the topic of discussion is, of course, the currently running Kickstarter from Free League Publishing for Vaesen, which is the Mythic Tales in Britain and Ireland, which again features the artwork that is by Johan. I'm going to pronounce
Egerkrans.
Yeah, which is iconic of the book and the setting. And in particular, of course, writing on this book is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay luminary Graham Davis, who I got to contribute with on the Enemy Within campaign. So it's going to be because he's been writing a few things as well through the Free League community publishing portal on Drive-Thru RPG.
Mm-hmm.
So if people want to check out some of his work right away, you can go there.
He's also on his own personal site. He does a lot of folklore writing as well. So he really knows his folklore stuff as well as his RPG stuff. He's like the perfect person to get to write this.
Yeah. And also you should check out our friends over at the Rookery. So that's Graham and Andy Law and a whole other bunch of ex writers for Warhammer Fantasy and so forth. They have their own publishing, who are slowly gearing up to put out stuff for them, and I've guested on their stream a few times talking about Warhammer and self-publishing stuff. So stuff out. Right, quickly game update. David, you've been running some Alien and Festive Vaesen. How's that been going?
Yeah, so on my own Twitch channel, The Drunken Storyteller, I've been running Alien Destroyer of Worlds. No one's yet dead. No one's died yet. I'm very disappointed.
Horribly.
Yeah, the game's gone horribly wrong because it's involving me rolling dice. So I've not managed to kill anybody yet, but it's fantastic fun. Everyone's having a lot of laugh on that one. And yeah, I've also run a few games of Vaesen over on my stream as well, so you can go check that out. Those are on YouTube. I've done one based in Scotland, which was written before the book came out, so there may be some issues with the new setting. I don't know. We'll see. And then I ran one at the weekend. Yeah, rules are rules, whatever.
Trust me, it bit me in the ass when I think we ran what did we run? We ran Soulbound, didn't we? We ran a what was it? The Shadowy Elves.
Dark Elves. No. You did the Wrath and Glory.
Yeah,
no.
Wrath and Glory with the Dark Elves, but also for Soulbound we did the ones from Warcry. What they're called, the Cainite Shadowstalkers, and then they took expansion. So
we keep predicting things, I think, on this. So if we keep doing stuff, maybe somebody will pick us up again.
Other gaming interesting news. Obviously, I should be recording to go out soon. The next episode of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. 24-hour party monsters. We've had a long hiatus off doing things. A busy new job starting at my end. And other cool gaming stuff I've picked up recently has been what? Just playing some Kingdom Death because the new card pack came through for 1.6 expansion. So
you've been playing that?
None of the new stuff's turned up in the game yet, but it took ages as always to re-sleeve cards and put stickers in books for the news.
I've got it, but I've not done anything with it yet. I'm waiting until the new year.
James, obviously, I know your situation. It's not so easy to crack out Kingdom Death or any gaming, but anything interesting in the computer games?
I've been playing a little bit of Wildermyth recently, which I suppose has a kind of thematic consistency with what we're talking about. It's there's some it's a strategy game, a small team strategy game, and you're in a kind of slightly mythy setting, and there's weird creatures of the forests and things, and odd stuff happens. But it does a lot of it algorithmically with storylines that get seeded and then follow up. I quite often end up very quickly with people with frog heads and star hands and all kinds of weird odds and ends. But that's been quite a lot of fun.
Cool. Let's think what else is interesting release wise. Nothing new out that I can really think of. From Vampire the Masquerade, there's a new scenario out called I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a new scenario out, I think written by Eddie Webb. And that's for 5th edition. There's, I think, Hunter the Visual Second edition really close to being on print on demand, very close. Nothing else particularly on the horror front though, other than obviously we know that Hunter, the Reckoning for 5th edition rule set is coming. That'll be in form that take. Also out, it's been out for a month or so now and has actually now hit silver. Is Sin Again, which is is Vampire the Requiem 2nd edition Dava clan book, which is on the Storyteller Vault, which I co-wrote on. So that's good to see that hit 100 more sales. And of course, more importantly, our scenarios for Vampire the Masquerade 15, so Ascension Knight and Make Blood Boil, they've had, because they're pay what you want, they've had together almost 600 downloads in the space of a month and a half, which is really good. Obviously, I'd rather if people would pay for them because it means then they get bronze and silver awards, but it's nice that people are downloading because that's how they went out. I think that's all the gaming news I can think of particular from our end. Is there anything, Matthew, is there anything interesting from the Free League and that maybe doesn't fall under the Vaesen Kickstarter?
Well, yeah. Today, just today, hours before, there was an announcement from the guys at. Oh, damn it! I've forgotten the name of the company.
Nexus. It's the Nexus.
Thank you very much. The company is something different.
I posted it earlier somewhere else.
Demiplane is the company.
Demiplane, yeah.
And Demiplane, who a few weeks ago announced Pathfinder Nexus, also got World of Darkness Nexus up and running. They're now done a deal, Free League, and have announced just today Nexus.
It's quite the time with all these different virtual tabletops, I will say, because obviously there is a virtual tabletop and then there is a there was Astral, there's
Roll20.
Roll20. It's and then there's which one is it? Tabletop Watch?
Yeah, so the Foundry.
Foundry, that's the one. And yeah, it's interesting to see how everyone's innovating this space. Sorry, I've done a lot of like web app design recently for my day job, so I think I have a better feel for how stuff works in the background on these things, like the actual back end.
They're certainly improving now. Like Roll20 is the go-to one, but it's so laggy and a little bit less than the new stuff that is coming out. The virtual tabletop stuff that is coming out now is so much better. So
yeah, I mean, I think people have different needs. So Roll20 was designed by coders for. I always feel
very much so.
One of my favorites is actually Roll ROLE, and that puts the video and the voice front and sticks a character sheet on the side. It's like with some gaming functionality. That's my preferred method, but I know even within among our Discord Patreon, people have different opinions. Foundry is very popular, and that's the one where Free League have put most of IP, but most of their investment in creating assets for their. It'll be interesting to see whether Foundry gets as much attention if they've climbed into bed with the Nexus guys.
And of course, you get all the Luddites like me that would much rather not have all the bells and whistles. And if you're playing online, Zoom works fine as far as I'm concerned. But then I think I'm in a minority.
There's something to be said about just stripping it all back, and it's just do you need to have all the tracking things? Do what you normally just trust your players. They've got their really need to be micromanaging, I guess, in a way.
And I think sometimes the moving of the icons on the maps becomes the activity rather than actually role playing the game. It feels a bit artificial.
You lose the kind of feel like if you're sat at the table and you have a map and you move the minis around. There's more to it. And it's a lot more tactile and it's quicker to do.
Yeah.
Whereas on a computer screen, it just feels a little stunted, I find. But
this is a rabbit hole of a discussion, though, because this gets into like, is PDF even the file format we should be using for role playing games in this day and age? PDFs, I don't, were a portable document format for printing. It's there. I think we might see an evolution of things, and then oh god, we get into the metaverse and everything else and virtual stuff.
Hey, that name is now legalized. You can't say metaverse.
Metaverse is not legalized by fate. No one owns the term metaverse because it predates them doing stuff. You can call it what you use it no matter what. That's like saying space marine.
Yeah.
Neil Stevenson invented metaverse in Snow.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, that's
which is funny because Snow Crash is a warning, not an aspiration. Oh, that's actually reminds me.
Most sci-fi.
That reminds me, actually, I'm gonna blow my own trumpet on this one, because in a BBC article about the Matrix and about the resurgence in cyberpunk media, the interview that Mike Pondsmith gave me for Cyber Magazine was cited, and for exactly the line that cyberpunk is not, again, I mean, it's a common line, but cyberpunk is not an aspiration, it's a warning. So it's quite nice to see that. The overlap of science and gaming, always fun. And I'm sure James has.
But people seem to need to keep being reminded about that.
I think it's an interesting point of debate, though, actually, because I think when I used to play 2020 back in the day, and I ran a lot of it, my players really seem to aspire to having cybernetic arms and cybernetic eyes and all the rest of it.
Yeah, but that involves losing them in the first place.
I know, but they didn't
usually a really horrific way.
Yeah.
And a lot of money as well, of course.
Oh, yeah. Which
I'm
we
sure
certainly
James,
know that's not going to happen.
James, you've mostly got some views on like the overlap between tabletop gaming and video games. Given day job, you see numerous attempts at things that blur the line.
I mean, some of the tricky stuff beyond, you already have a wall of information trying to get people into role play games. Like having the digital supports, like, yes, that kind of gives you some advantage there, but you've got to get them kind of trained up in that. There's the tutorializing. And then you get to the point where some players don't understand stuff. Like, I've played D&D games where I've helped people make their characters, and by the end of it, I've realized that actually one of my players had no idea what their character could do throughout the game, because they were just like, I can do a thing, right? Tell me I can do a thing. And it's like, yes, I've got a copy of your character sheet. You can do the fireball by doing this. I'm like, okay, cool, I do one of them. I think you run the risk with some of these digital tools where they will see the things up at the top and they will go, yes, okay, cool.
I think it's
top things.
Especially with something like D&D Beyond, which if you have a subscription to that, it suddenly gives you access to all of the books to a certain extent. Obviously, there's the paywall behind it all. But if you suddenly you want to join in a group that's quite established and then you end up buying all these books, it's suddenly a massive overload that is instantly there for you. Where that, to me, that always... other than the actual system that I don't particularly like with D&D, but one of the things that really puts me off it is just the vast quantity of material that's out there that most people in groups say you need to play it. So you can't, you meant to be able to just pick up the player's guide and make a character out of that and play it, but that's not what people do nowadays. And D&D and Beyond and things like that were meant to solve this issue where you had all access to everything and all that comes into it. But then for new players, it suddenly becomes an overwhelming, massive...
especially if they're up against a player who's experienced, who then knows exactly what they want to do in order to get the character they want.
But what we can do now nicely is we can bring this kind of nicely into free league stuff.
I was going to just say the problem with D&D is, I think, is because there's so much stuff, is actually you have to have a GM that actually
knows everything.
No, I don't think knows everything. I was going to say you have to have a GM and group who's actually satisfied to go, this is the limit of our garden.
Yeah,
all these other books can go away, because that's what I learned from writing for based on 5e, is that while there are ways that the game can certainly be broken by writing a certain power, but that power works for the setting, the book you're writing. And so sometimes I think you can't be, you shouldn't use the fact that there exists 20 bloody books, which if you combine all the powers and you multi-classes and that, it's going to break the game. Forget that. Just
you need a GM who's going to say no.
You need to have some quality. Maybe it's a bit of quality control, like just reducing what your options. Anyway, let's talk about Vaesen.
I was going to say, bring this back into kind of Free League stuff. Like you can kind of remove a lot of that problems because character creation in most Free League stuff is insanely simple.
So
can I just do one little comment first? The pronunciation is Vaesen.
Vaesen, okay.
Vaesen.
Yeah. Imagine it's spelled Vairs. That's the way it should be pronounced. Sorry.
Cool.
With a Swedish wife and working with Free League, I kind of get a bit pernickety on the point. So apologies if I'm nitpicking, but
no, that's fine. I mean, there's always discussion about how do you pronounce Zimmershay. Is it Zimmershay? Is it Zamishay? Or there's about 20 different ways that can be pronounced any day of the week. So
I've heard it pronounced so many different ways as well. So it's nice to have something kind of official, I suppose, because you obviously have those connections, Dave.
My wife would still complain that my accent and getting it right is a million miles from where it should be. But yeah, I do try at least.
I guess then I think to start off there, let's hand over to Dave and Matthew to pitch what is this game and what is the attraction to it to players. Like, where are they? What are they doing? And how, as they're the year zero rules, and how that supports the type of stories that you can play in the basics that stands.
As the best salesman in the team, Matt, did you want to go first, and then I'll.
I was going to say that you should take the liberty, but
we can come to that in a minute.
So I think, to be honest, for both Dave and I, Vaesen both to pride. I mean, we buy everything Free League anyway because we're Free League fans and we run a Free League podcast, so we back the Kickstarter.
I'm going to hands up and say guilty as well on this.
I like the book. I like the look of the book, and I remember having back the case, I sent on to get a copy of Edgar Glenn's original sort of textbook that he wrote, and I love that too. And that's all great. But I kind of thought it would sit on my phone pretty. We started playing it. Really good fun. In a while, we'll talk about mechanics, and I have a theory of why it's good fun. But Dave, I do want to turn over to you and to Magnus in an occasional campaign. It's not a thing we're playing regularly, but that really encourages role playing. And in fact, I was talking on our Discord today, come out right at the beginning of lockdown. So one of the things Niels had asked me to just create adventure short scenario that could be run multiple times at conventions when they're doing that. So I created a 2-hour-long scenario, and I like to think myself for being able to be really creating shorts. It's really hard to finish that thing 2 hours because everybody keeps bloody role playing, and it seems to encourage getting into character more than almost any other game that I've played. So Dave, I'm a GM. You tell me why you just get into character.
Well, I think if I take a tiny step back, so I think just to explain the broad premise of the game. So it's set in the 19th century. It's not set in any particular part of the 19th century. So it's just the 19th century, and you can, as a GM, you can really take any aspect of that period of history and play it into your game without being too sort of pedantic about the actual history. And it's set in Scandinavia in the core book, and it's all about sort of Nordic supernatural folklore and things that go bump in the night. And your characters in the game are members of what's called the Society. And the Society is a group of people who have the sight. And those people, rare people, are able to see Vaesen, and most normal people can't see the Vaesen unless they reveal themselves. And your role is to investigate things, that go bump in the night, Vaesen kind of mysteries. And the first thing that really draws you to the book, and I've said this to a few people, every time I pick up this book and look at it, even if we're not playing, I just fall in love with the game that tiny little bit more. The artwork, as you've already said, Johan Uger Krantz's artwork is absolutely spectacular. The style is slightly cartoony. It's not really cartoony, slightly, but still in every image you get a sense of dread or a sense of threat or of mystery. And there's so much of Free League's work is all of it is supported by fabulous artwork. And a number of Free League games over the years I've been drawn to, and nothing more than the artwork, and thought, that's cool, I need to have a look at that. So that's the basic premise. The other themes that the game is talking about are things like the change in the world as the 19th century and industrialization is spreading humans' influence throughout the world, and throughout the Nordic, the North. Vaesen are being forgotten, or they're being downtrodden, or they're being displaced. And the Vaesen don't like that. And a lot of the stories are very nuanced in that the immediate problem might be that people in a certain village are dying or bad things are happening to them. But actually, the root of that problem might be that a Vaesen has been mistreated, and actually the cause turns out to be the humans themselves. And it has that real sense about it. Magnuson, the character that I play in Matthew's campaign, is a butler to one of the other players. His tagline is "If I may take the liberty," whenever he wants to do something. And I've based that character on a character played by Victor Garber in season 8 of Frasier. He plays a butler to Frasier called Ferguson, and his tagline in that is "If I may take the liberty." So I based him on that. And there's something about the book, I'd be interested to hear Matt's theory about the mechanics, but I often say there's something about the book, almost from between the lines of the text, that encourages role-playing. And it just, I mean, I've thought about this quite a bit, and it's really difficult to put my finger on what actual bit in it makes me, or makes other players, it brings out the best in them, I think, in role-playing. So I'd be interested to hear Matt's theory.
Yeah, just on top of that, as you were saying that, what I've kind of come to realise for me, which is one of the reasons why I love it. So I'm a massive folklore nerd. It's one of my great passions. I have another podcast where I talk about folklore and tell folklore tales just by myself. But as you're saying that, the thing that kind of I think that draws me in each time that I look at it is it gives me that sense of wonder that I had as a kid when I was reading those folklore tales. It really has that feeling of being part of those tales again that I got when I was a kid. So each time I go in there, I read the story and I see something different behind the tale, behind the troll, or behind the mare that's in there. And I see a new take on these things, and I see a new way to kind of view them and then maybe bring them into a game. And it gives me that kind of sense of wonder. And I think for me, that's kind of why it really pulls out that role-playing thing, because it allows you then to kind of tell those stories you knew as a kid in a slightly different way, in the way that you viewed it through the way that the book has told you.
Yeah, and there's definitely a nostalgic element to the game. So in terms of the Vaesen that you'll come across, some of them listed in the book are going to be completely and utterly familiar to everybody. Things like mermaids, things like werewolves. But the book gives you a little sense of what the Nordic, Scandinavian lore behind that is, and that each description will give you a few little lines that are in each one of them is a plot hook or an idea for a scenario. It's beautifully done. It's wonderfully written. But then you get those Vaesen that are squarely from Scandinavian folklore that probably have got parallels around the world, but they're just not necessarily parallels that are immediately apparent. And some of those, again, they're just, some of them are mischievous. Some of them are trying to right wrongs that have happened to them or to others. Some of them are quite vengeful. But I think it's definitely got that real nostalgic feel that you were kind of referring to there, Dave.
Yeah, it's very much. What I'm really surprised about is it's for me, it was an instant hit for me when I saw this game, because it's something that I love personally. But when it was released, it was the first Kickstarter did well, but it didn't do as well as some of their other Kickstarters. So it's kind of been on a slow burn. But recently, it's just suddenly blown up, and as we've seen with the current Kickstarter for Mythic Britain and Island, and the other book that's coming with it, was it Winter
Seasons of Mystery.
Seasons of Mystery.
Yeah,
it's on $500,000. It blew through all the Kickstarter, all the stretch goals in the first day. So something has caught the imagination of people within it.
So I think there's something there that But there are some Free League games now. Matt and I are freelancers for Free League. We're not official Free League members, so we can't speak for them. But obviously, we have quite a lot of involvement with them. There was one thing a couple of years ago that I still feel slightly bad about, and that was the fact that games like Things from the Flood and games like, it seemed anyway at the time, Vaesen, were being overshadowed by the bigger titles that were sweeping the community, like Alien, for example, and all the Alien productions, and Things from the Flood as well did so well. And I felt a bit sad that Vaesen wasn't going to get its day in the sunshine. Now, great that is turning around. I still feel a little bit bad for Things from the Flood in that light, but you never know. Maybe that'll get its day in the sunshine as well.
I really hope so, because Things from the Flood is the game that pulled me into Free League. But it seems to have kind of disappeared somewhat, even now. If anyone's
overshadowed by the success, I think, which is really sad because it's such a good game.
And it's now they've got the obviously we've got Aliens with them, which is an absolutely phenomenal game. Next year they're bringing out Blade Runner, which I think will overshadow everything again. They're getting these big names, and the One Ring, they've just released the second edition of that, which is going to blow people around. They've got Twilight 2000. They've got all these big classic games coming to them. So, but yeah, Vaesen, it's nice to see it now kind of getting the light that I personally feel it deserved, because I'm obsessed with the game slightly.
And I say I've been absolutely loving playing Magnuson, and there was a wonderful moment where Emily, who plays my mistress, one of the characters was being entranced by a Vaesen, was going to walk to her death, and so I pulled my gun to shoot her, to try and nick her, to break her out of the trance. And Emily was going, "You don't have the liberty. You don't have the liberty."
Yeah. It just brings out those really interpersonal moments. You don't need to roll any dice. I've played games of Vaesen where no dice have been rolled.
Yeah, I think maybe that brings me on to I've just had a thought, and I was gonna, rather than just say it, I was going to defer to Matt to say his thought on why.
I'm going to talk about the whole of the Year Zero to explain where I think Vaesen sits. Obviously, it started with Mutant Year Zero, which is quite a complex game. There's a lot of moving parts to that. And by comparison, we were just talking about Things in the Flood and Tales from the Loop. That's really stripped back and quite simple. It's player facing, the GM doesn't need dice. Vaesen sits between the two of those and more towards the Tales from. So actually, it's really quite simple mechanics. It isn't so player facing. The GM does roll dice in Vaesen, but one of the important things that differentiates every single game is the method of pushing the dice. Now, with both Tales from the Loop and with Vaesen and with the dice, a limited number of us every time you play, which is to roll again, because the odds of success aren't actually huge on the dice pool normally. So you often need to roll your dice again, and that comes at a cost. The cost in all these three games that I've mentioned is a condition of some sort. You tick a box, you draw dice from your dice pool in future rolls, and re-roll the dice you've currently done again to see if you can succeed this time. Now, with the loop and with things that tends towards failure, and I think that's on purpose. You don't get to roll very many dice in those games compared to some other ones like Coriolis or Alien or Mutant Year Zero. You get relatively few dice to roll, and you get your limited conditions send you home crying to mum in Tales from the Loop. They kill you in Things from the Flood. They definitely may kill you again in Vaesen. But strictly speaking, I think players are actively discouraged from rolling dice unless they really need to make that.
Yeah.
Two things. One is, as Dave said, or you both said in a way, you can have a whole session without rolling any dice. And I think there's an overt and a subvert psychological impact. You're not necessarily wanting to roll dice because you know the chances of failure are quite high and the chance of success really low. But also, because you're nervous about those dice, you kind of save them towards the end where you can tick off and hope you can succeed. So you try and find out most of the all Vaesen stories are effectively detectives of a sort. So you try and do that through interpersonal interactions and try not to necessarily have to roll the dice, and definitely not to push the dice in those early stages.
I was
just going to say, as a quick open.
That sounds quite I would say. I mean, in conceptually, I think puts it into the same realm as, say, Trail of Cthulhu. So the Gumshoes, again, there you only really ever roll dice where there is the risk of danger, and any other investigation, you don't really roll dice. You check box the Gumshoe designed to allow you to push to do investigation, because obviously, who the hell wants to roll? Did you spot the clue? When the clue is the thing that's going to push on the story, that's not. The fun is you find the required clues, because all the characters are investigate and level, or else they would story.
They've got eyeballs, basically.
Yeah, and then the question is, what quality of clues to find? That's where you might roll, or you spend your bennies to find clues extra. And the question then is how the players, through role playing as people, put those clues together to then take the danger situation where either they know what they're doing or they have no clue, and that's when the dice matter, and that's when the danger occurs.
Yeah.
So I think it feels like that.
For sure. Yeah.
I was going to say, on the game that I played a couple of days ago, where I did this very, very quick winter-themed story in Iceland, we had an occultist and a writer. Now, the occultist has a crystal ball, and the writer has an ability called automatic writing. So I use these as the way to kind of forward the story, rather than going, I want to go and search this person's house and find out what took the child. It's like, well, you've got a skill called automatic writing. Why not do that and sit down and see if you can connect to things, rather than walking around the room and go, oh, look, there's big claw marks in the wall. You then get to do this really cool role play where the character suddenly sits down and then they lose control of their hand and they go out and then they look down and they see the results of the connection with whatever it is they're trying to connect to as they do the automatic writing. And so you kind of then get this connection of the spookier side of Vaesen and kind of what these people are going through and how they then are investigating it, but in a different way to what you would usually do in a. They're actually investigating it in that kind of spooky way. And when I used the crystal ball in that game, it messed up the player for the rest of the game. They couldn't roll a single thing afterwards. But they played it really, really well. The fact that they just saw everything and they go, oh my God, this thing's eating children. What? Spoiler alert if you ever watch that game.
I think there's definitely a thing about the stories taking you into what is ostensibly a normal environment, then just something is slightly off. And it's about the players asking the right questions and having the right conversations rather than rolling the right dice.
Yeah.
And the key thing for me, I think, trying to sum up what Matthew was saying, is the mechanics just get out of the way. Mechanics are very simple and are very straightforward. They're nicely done so that things like your items or your talents are written in a way that just invokes how you might use them. And you don't end up rolling dice until you are really coming to that critical moment when something is the real challenge to face. But you're given every opportunity to find those clues and then piece those clues together. And how you do that might be very different. In one of the scenarios we had, we were invited to dinner with the local dignitaries of the local town we were investigating. Now, obviously, Magnuson couldn't sit down next to Lady Inga and have dinner with her. So I went off and carried on serving the meal and then working in the kitchens, was able to investigate and do some interrogation of the staff in there, whilst everybody else had their lovely ornate dinner and had a conversation there. And it worked really nicely. We found different things out through those different conversations. And then when the characters came back together again, we were able to piece together a reasonably significant part of the story. Works beautifully.
It's very much a storytelling system. It's unlike Tales from the Flood and Things from the Loop, which don't really have combat. They have social combat in a way. Vaesen was the first, for me, it was the first Free League game that brought in the combat system to me. It's like I'd not played Coriolis before. I had Mutant Year Zero. I've got the books, but I've never played them. But Vaesen was the first game that really brought in the ability to punch something. It's when you then go down that and go, yes, I can do this, but then you realize after you've done it a few times, like, well, that's not actually a person, that's a Vaesen. I can't hurt it, therefore I need to actually know stuff, and then you realize
find another way around the problem. Yeah,
You've got to think with it. You've got to roleplay the game because the combat stops you from winning the game. You're likely
and the combat is something. Sorry, I just said the combat is something that you really don't want to do because you're likely to end up very badly as a result of it. I always kind of liken it to kind of combat that you would see in an old 1940s Basil Rathbone's Sherlock Holmes movie, where it's running along in the dark and firing a couple of shots and shouting "Stop, thief!" or whatever. And that's kind of it. And the game is set up for combat to be a very small part of it, unlike games like Alien, Mutant Year Zero, again to another example, where combat is a much more important part of your experience in that game as a character.
Cool. Chris or James, do you have any insights from what you've heard?
Go on, James.
I mean, it's fascinating stuff, really. Like, the one game of Tales from the Loop I played, our storyteller was very intense on rolling, getting us to roll checks, and it's all just been flooding over me that, like, yes, that's probably why we struggled quite so much. Like, everything was a check, and then by the end of it, we got nowhere because it's quite difficult to win those things. But I love a system where you can actually play and you're encouraged to do so. I mean, my D&D group basically are of a similar point where they don't, they engage much more with the role play side of it, and we sell them roll things. And it's why freely games, these ones always appeal to me. I've been looking through the rule book and I'm already marking stuff up, and I'm like, gaming.
It's interesting because every Free League game, the Free League intent with pretty much every game they put out is to roll the dice as little as you possibly need. As little
You've
as you
read
need
Twilight 2000, haven't you?
Well, I said most games. I think
Twilight 2000 has a certain heritage that it has to respect.
Yeah, of course.
Trying to say
you have to roll dice every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like saying Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is not a percentile system, and you see how people reacted to that. There's an element of respect about heritage.
I think some games are more forgiving for more dice rolling. So Twilight 2000, let's put that to one side. It's a different beast. But Alien, for example, and Mutant Year Zero, you should still roll the dice as little as possible. But the push mechanic is more forgiving. It encourages more dice rolling. You might need to roll more dice if you're coming up against bad things or you're wanting to hide from bad things more frequently.
But the more dice you roll in Alien, the more likely you are to run out of ammo, and then things go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always penalties for rolling too much. And I think that's the trick for a GM, particularly if you're new to a Free League game. It's getting the sense that you don't need to roll for every single thing that your player wants to do that you might do in another system. And that's fine. That's okay.
I found that when I want to introduce people to RPGs they're a little bit standoffish with it because they see D&D, they see they need different dice and they need to think about maths and it's a combat system and all this kind of stuff. And I turn around and go, no, I will give you a game that I can run just for you as one person. And I've done it for Vaesen quite well. I've run it a couple of times for just one person and said, I can do this entire thing without you touching a single dice. And they have so much fun with it. The two games that are on my streams, I have introduced 3 new players, 3 folklorists who are actually folklorists into RPGs, and they've gone, that was great fun. We've played D&D and we didn't enjoy it, but this is kind of what we wanted. We wanted to be able to tell stories. So if people are getting into RPGs to tell stories, I find that Freely, if you're a good GM and you understand kind of how it works, they're really good at introducing people into them. If people want to get into RPGs and do the dungeon crawl, traditional OSR stuff, dungeon crawl, and fight the big dragon at the end of it, then go down the D&D route. But it's kind of knowing the audience that you're playing to, and I think Free League works quite well for those people who want to tell a story.
It's interesting you say OSR because I was just reading, Dark Grim, because I've backed that, and it's kind of synthwave, almost Cronenberg-esque sci-fi horror, where everyone's like luminous green goop or something. But that's also, you look at that, you look at Mortborg, and they're all rules light, but those two count as OSR. So I think what you're actually getting at, I think it's something to do with how much of the game your interactions are represented as granular mechanics.
Yeah.
Because I think this is somewhere between, like, if you pick up like classic, the basic intros that got me role play gaming, like
the red box.
There's sweet F all rules in there, other than it does combat, and then it does a few other bits, and that's it. And then the rest is you to role play around. And I think that's where it is. Is like some games do have a system almost for everything, and that can be at its detriment. Again, I think that's where and it's about that granularity, and I mean that turns up in my conversations about why Wrath and Glory is great compared to the percentile system. Because I think the other thing is looking at Vaesen as a game, it's not very dense in its pages, as in it's not assaulting you with a wall of text, which is, I'll be honest, quite lovely, because I only properly read the D&D rule books in writing for Iron Kingdoms, and I was shocked at how much text is on a page. I'm just like, really? Is there a need for all this?
It's horrendous
into the game. Whereas if you go at it from the D&D Beyond, it's much easier to understand, which I think just says something about if you reach a certain age and you've got much more things to do, you don't have time to read text, which is actually not very to the point. So
it's this obsession with filling those. Most rulebooks are 340 pages long.
You got to fill that white space, man.
Yeah,
you got to fill that white space and validate your book costing however much. And
but you look at all of the Free League games, from Alien to Coriolis to Symbaroum. The books, they're not dense, but they portray the ideas and they give you everything that you need to do in like 250 odd pages. And less walls of text.
Matthew and I have to thank Free League for feeling at least that Alien was too dense, because otherwise they wouldn't have asked us to do Hope's Last Day, the core book, because they thought Chariot of the Gods was too long, which was supposed to be the core book scenario.
Chariot of the Gods.
They put that out into a separate scenario. Yeah,
that would have been an overkill for the book.
And we did Hope's Last Day.
The one thing I wanted to bring up, which I think is maybe different about Vaesen as a in the Year Zero games, is that there's the focus on the actual society and building up the castle, building up the resources, the location, the contacts. That to me seemed more unique to this game than the other ones.
I suggest it's one of the most original ideas. It's quite a lot similar to the Ark in
Mutant Year Zero.
Yeah.
You have the Ark concept, and you build up the Ark, and the Ark itself in Mutant forms community, and you can run bottle games just within your Ark. So it's another level of it. But this is definitely a kind of evolution of that concept. Yeah. The other game that's got this kind of thing in it, again, obviously, is Forbidden Lands. You've got your stronghold concept, which again is similar but different. I think Matthew, you tell me what you think because you're the GM. But I think the approach in Vaesen is subtler and easier and more effective for a game in terms of building up your castle or your stronghold, whatever you want to call it, than the Forbidden Lands approach.
Yeah, so I think Forbidden Lands uses a money sink.
If you ever have any money, which we don't.
I think there were probably two creative minds behind it. Said, "Oh God, the problem with it is everybody gets millions of gold pieces and don't know what to do with it." And one of them went, "So I'm going to have the stronghold as a money sink," and the other one said, "I'm just going to make their less treasure." Dave really wants a stronghold, and the one time they tried to run, that's by the by.
We've got no way of making enough money to run a stronghold. We couldn't even pay a guard for 1 week. That was how poor we were.
But in
it's a different version of Warhammer Fantasy where everything is grim dark and you have no money, but you really want that castle.
Yeah, absolutely.
But coming back to the topic, Vaesen, to be fair, Dave, I have let you play with it enough because we've done most of these adventures as sort of showcase streaming adventures rather than your campaign. You know, that's the sort of thing that gets missed off the beginning and end of the adventure, so that show the people watching it on YouTube or Twitch the core of the adventure. But we're still doing a little bit.
Yeah. Just talk about the castle a bit within Vaesen, because we want to keep it within Vaesen, just so people are aware of it. If you read, when you get into the book, you realise that the reason why we're talking about building up the castle is the society has fallen, and that you as players are being brought back into it by the last members who effectively dissolved the society a couple of decades ago, and you are now being brought back in. So there's a mini campaign in the back of the book, like there are in most Free League books, that is kind of bringing you in to try and find out this new mystery and why the castle has fallen. Then you've got to recreate the society. So that's kind of why we're talking about this and where it kind of fits in. I just thought I'd add that in there so people are aware of what we're talking about when we say building a castle and what we mean by that.
Yeah, and so the castle exists in a dilapidated state. You're not there building a fort in the 17th century. You've taken over a dilapidated, and what you're doing effectively is
by an old lady in the hospital.
Dusty old rooms and realizing it has more or adding more function to it. Like, photography is a new thing in the 19th century. Let's create a photography here in the castle and do things like that. And in fact, I guess the way that Dave, we've done most of that sort of castle building has actually been in our patron Thomas's Japanese Vaesen campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention that. So Thomas Bolton, who's one of our patrons, has done a version of Vaesen set in the Meiji period in Japan, and we
need to get a hold of them.
It's on drive-through, I think.
I know it is, and I keep looking at it and going, I really need to, but I don't need any more ideas thrown at me to writing projects.
It's really nicely done. Thomas and his collaborators have done a fabulous job and really enjoyed playing it, and it really evoked the setting of a bit of period of history that I know very little about. But in that, yes, we did manage. We had our was it actually a castle, or was it just like an old mansion house?
It was a castle. It was in a Japanese sense of castle. So,
yeah. But we then built a strong room as our first feature, because we had recovered some items that had Vaesen trapped within them, and we didn't want to just leave them lying around in the living room. So it was.
It's like the Ghostbusters ghost vault, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
Did you deck it out like the old school ninja movies where you'd have creaking floorboards and things? So...
Well, my character was too busy sorting out the library. So
that was the other thing. Sort of our first upgrade was the fact that you were a librarian. There's a lot to do. But so the castle, more than in Forbidden Lands, is the very core. It's where you start all your adventures, and it's important to recognise, I think, the game's sort of literary underpinnings in that. Every adventure starts effectively with a letter or an invitation of some sort that is effectively delivered to the castle, and you're all sitting at the castle reading about this mystery in some far-flung part of the mythic, planning for the journey there, and particularly, of course, if you do have a car with the library, maybe doing some research in the library and piecing together the clues in that letter about what the Vaesen might be that you're going to investigate. So there's a very sort of rigid structure to the adventures, or in all the publishers, where you kind of do Get the invitation, do your castle research, maybe go and buy a piece of equipment, travel, and then arrive at the the location and do the role playing bit. This is the bit I mean, because we're streaming a lot of these, I often cut short all of that and plonk you the adventure for our. And
I found you can spend hours. You can spend hours doing that journey from one place to another as they just sat on a train having a conversation, going, "Oh, look at the mountains! Oh, look at the weather!" You're like 3 hours later, you spent 3 hours talking about the weather. Stop it, please!
You'd be surprised how much people want to see the settlement section. Like when I did Kingdom Death with on tabletop, and we cut out on the first one for the first few videos. We didn't show the settlement section. We just cut straight to the hunt and the showdown. And people were like, "Oh, but we want to see what you built, like how you expanded the settlement and what you made." And we're like, "Really? You want to see us
people want to see the world
over bits?" But apparently that's interesting. So it's interesting when people get their kicks.
Yeah, people want to, like, with what I found with something like Vaesen, and I've done it with some other games, is they want to, if you give them the opportunity, people want to be able to have that ability to create the world as they're going along. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, I've created the library and the books and things you're going to find there, and I've told you you're going to do a journey, and then I've created everything else afterwards. You go, well, there's this bit in the middle which I've got nothing for. You lot do it. And they love, a lot of players will love that, the ability to just sit there, talk to the other players, have a conversation like they're having a cup of coffee on a train, and just watching the world go by. People, the mundanity of it weirdly attracts certain people.
I think, well, not just certain, but I think everybody who's in Vaesen really likes that sort of stuff. And we saw
Nordic horror. It's that banality of nothing happening, and then there's a massive, weird, scary-ass creature at the end of it, and you win. And it's like, oh, well, you don't win. You either die horribly, or someone else dies horribly, and it all goes away.
Come to an arrangement, I think, is probably the best way of talking about it.
Yes.
You hardly ever win.
Conscious time then. So the new Kickstarter, as we said, obviously more artwork that as you expect from Johan, and we also have essentially as writing and design. We have Graham Davis has written, including also Vampire the Masquerade back in the day, and I've said I need to chat to him about that.
He's very busy at the moment, apparently.
He is incredibly busy with.
Oh, right. So we're your second best guest. So you couldn't get away.
I think I could
we knew that, though, surely.
I will nail down Graham at some point. But...
I will say, I asked you guys first, and then Dave said yes, and then I went, hang on a minute, Graham's written this. I should probably get Graham as well, and he just said no.
Oh, okay.
No, they basically. I can tell you now. The Rookery put out a stream almost every, and he's on a lot of, and that's as well as writing stuff for the. So and plus whatever else he's been hired for, he is busy. So what are we expecting from this Kickstarter then? Like,
funny enough, I wanted to ask Dave a question about this. So Dave and I both work, or now actually both the book. Just to follow on from our discussion of the castle in the Mythic North, our castle is set in Uppsala, I believe, but I can't remember, Dave. Castle is in London, or rather the home base of society, if you want to have it in home base.
The Rose House, isn't it?
Yes. That's
in
right.
London, but where is it?
I think Dave just said. I can't remember exactly where it is.
It's called the Rose House, and it is. I think it's kind of on the richer outskirts of what is 19th century London. So it's probably basically city centre London nowadays. But
I don't remember the exact.
I don't know too much about it. Obviously, I've not seen the rules of it. All I know is what's on the Kickstarter. As much as I've tried to get a sneak peek at it, I've not managed to.
We had a sneak peek some time ago, and I think you should be the first one. You should be the one that starts, because I looked at the adventures, which are kind of the second half of it, and you looked at the first half of it. So, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So they asked Matthew and me to give the text a good once over. Matthew, we decided Matthew would look at the scenarios and I would look at the rest. What does it give us? I mean, it gives a lot of background, as you would expect, of Britain at the time. It tries to pull out, again, the not being too prescriptive over what part of the 19th century you're talking about. So there's quite a lot of developments throughout the 19th century. If you want to play any of them in, don't be too pedantic about the actual specific year you're trying to run your game in. It's not that kind of a game. It looks at, obviously, all the countries of Britain and Ireland. So there's obviously the sort of southeast London focus. There's a lot going on in London. That's where the society is based in it. But the rest of Britain and Ireland gets really thorough treatment as well. There are a lot of scenario hooks and ideas. So there's quite a lot of sort of vignettes about certain things across the whole country, which are trying to give you as a GM, a small bit of text and a nice bit of lore that is traditional, real folklore from Britain and Ireland. You can then take and do with what you please. As part of that, I was able to suggest about 15 or so additional locations to try and really plump out the number of places and locations and folklore aspects that were included in the book, and I think those have been included. And got to review the rest of it and offered a few comments. With quite a lot of Free League stuff, they use me, and this is kind of a lot what they do with me for Alien as well, to kind of look at it from a player's point of view and make sure that what's being produced is going to land well at the table. And then usually I'm lucky enough to be able to offer some suggestions, which more often than not that they accept, and we write those in. So you've got a broad span. You've got nothing is set in stone. There is no. I think one of the things that we all recognise about folklore is same story changes depending on where you come from or where you hear it, or there'll be regional variations. So it's not trying to be too prescriptive about exactly what the story is or what the reason behind occurrence might be. It gives you the occurrence, or it gives you the basic bit of lore, and then it allows you to draw inferences for yourself as a GM, and hopefully gives you plenty of avenues to take each line in the way that you wish to take it, and the way that you wish to develop it for your particular game and your players at the table.
It's one of the things that folklore is if you read a story about an English giant, a giant from England, it's going to be a very, very different tale to the stories that you'll hear. If you read the story of Gog Magog from Cornwall, compared to weirdly, there's a mound in Cambridgeshire called Gog Magog Mound, and the relationship between those two is very, very different, even though they're named after the same giant.
Yeah.
And you've got other giants around the UK who are not big ass mean people who do horrible things. But then there's an Irish giant who yeets his children off a cliff. So there's different ways of folklore creatures appearing, and it doesn't necessarily. One of the things I love about what the core book has done is it's given you the overarching idea. It's not giving you a specific way of things how they should play.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how they do Mythic Britain and bring in a lot of the stories like the Selkies and the Kelpies, the Boggarts, which we know are coming up. So we know Selkies and Boggarts are going to be in there because they've hit their Kickstarters. Yeah. And I'm really interested to see these because I know what the ideas of these represent, and I know specific stories related to them. So I'm really interested to see how they've put these into a format that can be used across a game, because I know how I would do it, and I've run a game with a Selkie.
And I suspect that you'll find that even if the representation in the book isn't exactly what you would think as your kind of Selkie, there'll be plenty there for you to be able to just twist it slightly and bring it to the place you want it to be as a GM. So I think it should be really easy to use in that respect.
I think that's one of the things that I found with it. So it is just instantly, it's like I recognize these creatures and then I know stories and I can relate them across. Like this, I don't recognize anything as anything in folklore because everything is mutable in folklore.
I think the other interesting about this book as well is because I think really as a nation that's been invaded and settled by news over a long time is the kind of like the way that different folks kind of juxtapose against each other and how they amalgamate. That's always quite cute.
Like if you take the actual story of where Albion comes from, we're actually the giants are weird ass descendants of Persian women having sex with something, and then the Greeks come over and beat up the giants, and so we're technically Greek if you take that traditional idea and folklore stories of Albion and stuff. So there's a lot of weird stuff within British folklore.
And I think that a book like this can only hope to do a fraction of it. I suspect there'll be people who will be looking for their favourite bit of folklore and will be disappointed that they don't find.
There's no dragons yet. That's all we have played. There no dragons in the whole city.
No spoilers, Matthew.
So one of the things that that Freely actually released today on Facebook is a map that is now in its finished state. Dave and I saw it last and had to make quite a few corrections to it. But
mostly quite minor, but there were a few.
But there is a dragon on that.
They had London up where Manchester was, didn't they? That was
nothing quite that bad. No, it was more about, shall we say, our colonials to the English colonial intention. The other three countries in the Union a little bit. Interestingly represented. So we've, I think, hopefully helped them with that. We've done some spelling errors. I've made sure there's a black shook in East Anglia as well, which that little illustration.
I'm glad that you've put Black Shook in East Anglia and not just put him across the entirety of the UK.
Well, he's a little bit Suffolk from the Norfolk, but
it really depends. Like there's if you go to so the scenario that
he warned. I know Mark Norman of the Folklore Podcast, who is basically the Black Dog God. So be careful where we go.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that because obviously the scenario I wrote for Chronicles of Darkness on the Storyteller Vault is based on my hometown in Herefordshire. We have that's where we have the legend of Black Vaughan, who appears as a black dog, or at least he has a ghost. He appears as a ghost of a bull and a fly as well, amongst other things, terrorizing the town. And that is the source myth for Hound of the Baskervilles. Down the road from where I live is Baskerville Manor. So, the black dog myth is,
it's a UK-wide myth.
It's ubiquitous, isn't it? There's a myth almost everywhere, I guess, isn't there?
Yeah, there is literally a myth in almost every single region and town of the UK of a black dog. But the name Shook is specifically an East Anglian name.
Oh yeah,
when I hear people say that there's a black Shook at Manchester Cathedral, I'm like, no, there's a black dog at Manchester Cathedral.
But you have to. But that's mostly also, if you think about it, given that the way that people have moved around from the countryside into the cities as part of industrialization, that terminology at a point, homogenize and move around,
which is a really cool thing that you can actually bring.
You shouldn't use that against someone to say there's a black Shook. That's that's their reference, or where they've heard it from is likely the way that a town or city has grown and been populated over time, which is actually then quite within the context of this Kickstarter is interesting. Of course, again, we're looking at the 19th century, we're looking at industrialization, we're looking at people coming from one area of the country to another to find work. That's going to have the mixing of legend and folklore from what parts of Britain that actually, in some respects, are quite distinct, especially from Cornwall and Somerset. Or your
Ireland is a bit of a weird place. So
this is a theme of the book, actually, just as in the Mythic North, there is an underlying meta theme of industrialization and old rural is changing. Obviously,
cutting down trees
in Britain and Ireland as well, but I think particularly in this book and in the adventures portrayed, a lot of it is about the movement of people to the into the cities and things like that, but also, of course, the Vaesen. So that will be, I think, an added part of this theme, if you like, over what we see in the Mythic North books.
One question I do have about, and I don't know how much you can say about this. I know you've obviously seen a lot more of it than we have. In the core Vaesen book, we see the rebuilding of the society because the society has obviously taken this step back with the industrialization and stuff. But what we're seeing in the new Kickstarter is we have the Rose House and the British Society. My kind of what I'm really interested to see is how this connects to the core, the original society in the core book, because the Nordic society that you present in the core book is very much a dilapidated thing. It's falling back and it's not got connections with anybody, and you're coming in as the people who are going to revive it. Is the British society in the Rose House completely separate? Are we seeing like just a completely separate society and basically kind of a stick on the side module, or is it homogenized and are we seeing a connection between the societies? And so if we then go further on and we see different countries being put in, so whether we see the Mediterranean societies come in or whether we see an Asian society or an American society and stuff, are we going to see a homogenized connection across the board, do we think? Or is that something that's being brought in, or is it literally just everyone's up for themselves? I don't know how much you can say on that.
I guess there's elements of spoiler in it. There are plans. I say, we're not official Free League, so whatever we say is just kind of our opinion, and it's not an official announcement. There's definitely plans to do more books above and beyond Mythic Britain and Ireland. I'm not. I think I'm probably not going to say anything at this point, I'm afraid.
I hate you.
I know, and
I think one thing
I don't.
But probably
I kind of like the suspense.
Either way, if there's a broad thing, is this a homogenous Linnaean society spread out of Uppsala, or is it something different but similar in the UK? Yeah. I think there's enough choice there for GMs to be able to say, okay, this is how our society.
Because one of the things that, if you look at the 19th century, is towards the end of it, you obviously get the invention of the telephone, and you get the invention of Morse code across the world, so you can see a faster communication network building up. One of the things when I ran my Scottish game for the folklore people is this actually played an important part of where the Edinburgh Society had come from and how they all communicated.
There's certainly
They
nothing to
actually use
stop
these things,
you.
No, and that's one of the things I like about it. Yeah,
taking your players who are playing Swedish or Scandinavian society members and running them straight across to run the scenarios in Mythic Britain and Ireland with those set of characters. There's absolutely nothing in there to stop you doing that.
Yeah, I think because we stated that. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was going to say, there's also an interesting topic here about. I mean, it depends how the society is presented. Character play with British setting. And I think that should be treated in the right way because obviously you've got I think that leads to the point is actually it'd be very interesting expanding on where possibly how the society has to the kind of things of colonialism because of course yes people have gone everywhere but does that mean you've got Vaesen from everywhere coming back to Britain because of the trade of the empire and various relics that have pilfered, borrowed is the wrong word, definitely stolen from all these countries. I think there's a lot of there's a lot.
The British Museum definitely needs a look at.
Play with there.
There's a lot of scope for very interesting stories to be told along that theme. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I like one of the things I always think about when I do this and I speak to people I know who've played this in America. And they bring in the American folklore traditions. I'm instantly going to Neil Gaiman's American Gods and thinking like, well, yeah, did that happen in the 18th century when we started to kind of have that crossover? Did people bring things across? And so we can then. So I think there's a lot of scope within that.
That reminds me of the classic Supernatural episode where a town, and it's the only one of the good episodes. It's actually like into one, I think. So we're allowed to watch those episodes. Is they have
three, it's all good, and then it all goes shit.
They have they deal with a town which is sacrificing lovers, so young couple, to Nordic tree god.
I remember
every
that
year.
one, yeah.
And when they do it, it takes the flesh of them to make a new body for a year, and essentially it's a scarecrow that stalks this orchard and feed the blood of these lovers the first tree. So you could definitely go that seems very on point. And then also like Sleepy Hollow's Headless Horseman. Well, that's a Doulahan, which is totally is an Irish
mythology
of origin. So
and I guess it's no surprise that a lot of North American Western imported folklore is variations of the folklore that their ancestors brought with them.
Of course, yeah.
What's really interesting as well is if you kind of go into Central and Southern American societies and look at their modern folklore, so the more Hispanic folklore, there's this weird amalgamation of the traditional folklore that has arisen from their natives that is amalgamated with the travelers, the people who've moved over there and colonized the place. And they come up with some fantastic stories as well. So you can look at this kind of traveling and this amalgamation across the world of how these folk stories grow. So there's a lot of potential, I feel, within the game itself to go it. And when you look at the artwork that Johan is producing of other stories and things, I think there's a lot that we can do with it.
Being aware of time.
I was just going to say.
Wrap up. Obviously, so I'm going to just do a rundown of what the context of this. So we've got information about the British Society, its founders and its headquarters. Guest here of Sprawling London, that's classic, and Adventure Life Society. A guide to the mythology of an island, location, the Isles. A chapter, obviously, about various beings, background and story seeds. Then there is 3 pre-written scenarios that you play, one of which takes place in classic Wales across the border of from my hometown. By the sounds of it,
pronounce the name of that. Pronounce the name of
Llantwilin.
it. There we go.
Llantwil. It sounds like Llantwil. Yeah.
Llantwilin.
And then with Vaesen Seasons Mystery, that's a collection of scenarios.
Yes, it's a collection of scenarios. So it's effectively the same thing as the Wicked Secret, isn't it?
So that's 4 scenarios written by the likes of Gabriel de Boer, who wrote Wicked Secret in the original one. I think he wrote that one.
Yeah.
And those are written as settings in the Scandinavian setting, but Matthew and I have been working on a little bit of work to translate them, so you can play them in Britain and Ireland if you wish to. So we've added that.
Yeah,
really deep in Scand
culture and
folk custom. So in fact, we were asked, "Oh, could you just find 4 places where these could be set?" And frankly,
well, if you need
really
any help,
hard work.
just hit me up. I'm sure I can help you with those. I've got enough knowledge on these things. So
I think we sorted it in the end, but I think very much a bit of an afterthought. Limited word count, very limited. I think we've done. Well, we'll leave it up to you to see whether we've done a bang up. But yeah.
On top of those 2 books, they've also hit, as I said at the beginning of the episode, within the first 24 hours, they hit every single stretch goal that was in there. And they've now been rapidly going, crap, and throwing out a load more stretch goals, which have also all been hit. I think there's only 3 stretch goals. I think there's 3 stretch goals left at the moment. And one of those is one that I'm absolutely desperate for people to get, which is a solo play version of Vaesen. So this allows you to play the game as a individual. You don't need a GM, and you can literally sit there and play it by yourself. And I think this would be an amazing way to play the game, and it's certainly something that I would love to have. So,
cool.
And as we say, I think it's at nearly $500,000, which is way beyond what the original Kickstarter hit. So there's a lot of potential there. Go check it out. We'll put a link in the notes, I'm sure, when we do this.
Yeah, there'll be a link in the show notes because as people be listed, this goes out this Friday, so there'll be like Kickstarter. But yeah, that's everything in there. Any final comments or thoughts or plug, James? Any final thoughts?
I mean, like I can't really compete with David on his his folklore knowledge. This has been it's been amazing. Like honestly, it sounds like such a lot of fun. And I'm, as always, as soon as we start talking about this stuff, my brain starts contemplating like what would I run? What would I do? Which
the
I
Isle
think
of
is
Wight. The answer is always the Isle of Wight, isn't it?
the
James?
Mother Island will not let me
It's
go.
always the Isle of
No,
Wight.
do it. There's some amazing stories in the Isle of Wight, James. Have a look at them and run it. It's
James
a really
has
brilliant place to do it.
written an Isle of Wights in our story hook for Secret Files back in the
Yes,
day.
he has. So you can
we've
quite
already got
easily
one of
translate it.
And then it came true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Me.
But yeah, to wrap up, obviously, if people want stuff about the games, they can go over to the Effekt Podcast. Where can they find that?
Well, Matt, you always do this bit.
Or David, yeah, where can you find the Effekt Podcast?
Matt normally does this bit. Oh, is he gone? Okay, you can find us at the Effekt AP on effektpodcast.org or effektap.org for our actual play channel. And we have episodes that download every 2 weeks, usually on a Friday or a Saturday. So come and have a listen. Our AP goes out weekly. We've got tons of AP content that we're just trying to have through and get out there, but that goes out weekly. But the magazine show is fortnightly on a Friday or Saturday. And come and have a listen. We'd love to have you on board. And thank you, gents, for the invite. It's great fun talking about these games. So thank you very much for inviting us on to a fabulous show.
Since we're talking about Vaesen in particular, I do want to point out Summer in December, which is available on DriveThruRPG, which is an introductory adventure for Vaesen.
Is that is that through Free League or through their?
It's through the Free League Workshop.
So go onto Free League Workshop, DriveThruRPG. There's some really cool stuff in there. I do.
And who wrote that, Matthew?
I wrote that, Dave.
Just get the plug.
I might have to do a new edition with a little paragraph saying, if you want to run this,
yes.
I'm thinking Cold Christmas up near where? I'm in Cold Christmas. That's to me.
Excellent. Obviously, thank you everyone for taking the time out to chat about this Kickstarter. There'll be a link. Oh, what's that? Obviously, if people want to get in contact with us, they can find us now darkerdaysradio.com. They can find us on Twitter at darkerdaysradio, Instagram at darkerdaysradio. They can find us on Facebook, of course. They disked and there. where they can chat about all Worlds of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness and horror games and Warhammer games. Previously had episodes out about inclusivity and diversity in worlds of Warhammer. We've had episodes about Bretonians and playing pseudo French people in the Warhammer Fantasy Old World. And our upcoming Dark Hammer episode will likely cover Necrons. And of course, Mike will have
in space.
And of course, Mike will have content and audio from PAX Unplugged, took place just gone in the US.
Yeah.
But yes, there's lots of cool stuff coming out. It's busy again. It always there's always a lull in Darker Days Radio, and then suddenly we get really busy again. And my Christmas is going to be busy again because I'm going to be writing some more stuff, which I can't talk about right now. So anyway, that's it. So thanks for everyone taking part, and we'll be back very soon. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
This has been an episode of Darker Days Radio. Special thanks to Occam's Laser for the intro, outro, and new bumper music from their hit album, 9 Circles. Check out the rest of their work at occamslaser.bandcamp.com.